The little alien girl had not spoken a single word in 6 years. Not when doctors examined her. Not when diplomats tried to comfort her. Not when psychologists from 12 worlds spent months attempting to reach her shattered mind. She simply sat in silence. And on the day everyone finally gave up, a human quietly pulled up a chair and sat beside her. No one expected what would happen next. The rain tapped softly against the transparent dome of Horizon Refuge Center, one of the largest shelters in the Orion sector. Inside room 47, a small child stared out the window. Her name was Lyra. At least, that was what the records said. She belonged to the Varelians, a peaceful species known for their musical language and deep emotional bonds. Before the war, Varelian children learned songs before they learned mathematics. But Lyra had not sung in years. She had not spoken either. When she was only 6 years old, her homeworld had been destroyed during the brutal Carthan invasion. Millions died. Entire cities vanished beneath orbital fire. Among the survivors, Lyra's case became famous throughout the galaxy. Not because she was important. Not because she was powerful. But because she never made a sound again. Doctors called it extreme psychological trauma. To most people, she became a symbol of what war truly cost. Today she sat exactly where she always sat today. Near the window. Hands folded. Eyes distant. Silent. Across the room, Director Salen watched through a glass panel. The elderly alien sighed. Another failed session. A therapist nodded. She didn't respond. Nothing at all. The therapist shook his head. Nothing. Salen closed his eyes. 6 years. 6 long years. Hundreds of experts. Thousands of hours. Nothing. The director was about to leave when a voice interrupted him. Can I go in? Salen turned. Standing behind him was a human maintenance worker carrying a toolbox. The director frowned. Excuse me. The man pointed toward Lyra's room. Can I sit with her? Several staff members exchanged confused looks. You're not a therapist, one said. The human shrugged. No. A doctor. No. A psychologist. No. The room grew silent. Then why? The human smiled faintly. Because everybody keeps trying to make her talk. He looked through the glass. Maybe she's tired of talking. The staff stared at him as if he had lost his mind. Salen folded his arms. And what exactly do you plan to do? The human lifted his toolbox. I need to repair the heating vent in her room. The director blinked. That's it. That's it. For reasons he couldn't explain, Salen finally nodded. Fine. A few moments later, the door slid open. The human entered quietly. Lyra didn't react. She never did. The man walked to the corner vent and began working. No introductions. No questions. No therapy techniques. No speeches. Just work. Minutes passed. The room remained silent except for the sound of tools clicking against metal. For the first time in years, nobody was demanding anything from the child. Nobody was asking her to relive her pain. Nobody was trying to fix her. The human simply existed beside her. After nearly an hour, he finished. He packed away his tools. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of leaving, he pulled a chair beside the window and sat down. Not facing her. Not staring at her. Just sitting. Watching the rain. The two remained there together in complete silence. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. 20. The staff watching outside became increasingly confused. What is he doing? I have no idea. Neither did Director Salen. Then the human finally spoke. Not to Lyra. Not really. Almost as if he was speaking to himself. Rain sounds different on every world. Lyra didn't move. The human smiled faintly. Earth rain sounds softer. Silence. Then he added. But I like this one too. And for the first time in 6 years, the little alien girl's fingers twitched. Outside the room, every observer froze. Nobody dared breathe. Something had changed. Something incredibly small. But after 6 years of absolute silence, It felt like the beginning of a miracle. The next morning, Lyra was waiting by the window. No one noticed at first. After all, she always sat there. But this time was different. For the first time in years, her eyes were not fixed on the distant horizon. They were fixed on the door, as if she were waiting for someone. At exactly 9 o'clock, the door slid open. The human stepped inside carrying a small metal lunch container. Director Salen and half the facility staff were secretly watching through the observation glass. Nobody wanted to admit it, but they were curious. The human glanced at Lyra. Morning. No response. No surprise there. He simply sat down beside the window. Again. No therapy. No questions. No attempts to force conversation. He opened his lunchbox and began eating. A few minutes later, he pulled out a second sandwich. Made too much. He placed it on the table between them. Then continued eating his own. The staff outside exchanged confused looks. That's his strategy. I think that's his lunch. Minutes passed. The sandwich remained untouched. The human didn't mention it again. Didn't encourage her. Didn't even look at it. Eventually he finished eating and stood. See you tomorrow. Then he left. The room became silent again. Hours later, a nurse entered for routine cleaning. She stopped instantly. The sandwich was gone. The news spread through the facility within minutes. Director Salen rushed to the security office. The cameras confirmed it. After the human left, Lyra had slowly reached for the sandwich. It was the first time she had willingly touched something offered by another person in nearly 4 years. The staff were stunned, but the human seemed completely unimpressed. The following day he returned, this time carrying 2 small cups. One contained a bright blue frozen dessert. The other was green. He sat beside Lyra and pointed at them. I have no idea which one tastes worse. Silence. He took a spoonful of the blue one. His face immediately twisted in horror. Oh, that's terrible. Outside the room, several observers laughed. The human dramatically looked at the cup. I think this might actually be a biological weapon. For the first time, something extraordinary happened. Lyra blinked. Not a normal blink. A reaction. A tiny crack in the wall surrounding her emotions. The human continued. I may report this to interstellar authorities. He took another bite. Yep, definitely poison. For a fraction of a second, the corner of Lyra's mouth moved. Not enough to become a smile, but enough for everyone watching to gasp. Director Salen nearly dropped his tablet. Did she just? Yes. She almost smiled. Nobody could believe it. 6 years. And an accidental joke about bad ice cream had accomplished more than hundreds of specialists. Weeks passed. The human became part of Lyra's daily routine. His name was Ethan Ward. Former engineer. Former soldier. Current maintenance worker. Nobody knew why he spent so much time with her. Even Ethan wasn't entirely sure. He simply felt that she shouldn't have to sit alone. Each day he brought stories. Not stories about war. Not stories about loss. Just ordinary things. Funny coworkers. Broken machines. Embarrassing childhood moments from Earth. Lyra never responded. But she listened. And Ethan knew she listened because her eyes followed him now. Sometimes when he entered the room, she would turn toward him before he spoke. That tiny action became the highlight of everyone's day. Then one afternoon everything changed. Ethan entered the room carrying an old photograph. A faded picture of a smiling woman. Lyra immediately noticed it. Ethan sat quietly. For a long time he stared at the photograph. The cheerful energy he usually carried seemed gone. Finally he spoke. My wife loved rain. Outside the room, Director Salen frowned. Nobody had ever heard Ethan mention a wife before. The human looked down at the picture. His voice became softer. She died during the war. The room fell silent. For the first time, Lyra slowly turned away from the window and looked directly at him. Not through him. At him. Ethan didn't notice. He was too busy staring at the photograph. Some days, he whispered, I still expect her to walk through the door. The little alien girl watched him carefully. For the first time in years, someone wasn't trying to heal her. Someone was showing her their own broken heart. And for the first time since arriving at the refuge center, Lyra felt something she thought had died long ago. Connection. The entire galaxy knew Lyra as the silent child. But nobody knew that every night, when darkness filled her room, she remembered the screams. The fire. The falling ships. The sound of her mother's voice disappearing beneath the chaos. Those memories lived inside her like wounds that never healed. And every time someone asked her to speak, she heard those sounds all over again. That was why she remained silent. Not because she couldn't speak. Because speaking hurt. 3 days after Ethan showed her the photograph, he returned carrying a small wooden box. Lyra immediately noticed it. The box looked old. Worn. Different from the futuristic technology surrounding them. Ethan sat beside the window. Found this while cleaning my apartment. He opened the lid. Inside was a tiny musical instrument. A simple earth harmonica. It belonged to my father. Lyra watched quietly. Ethan smiled. Fair warning. I'm terrible at this. He placed the harmonica against his lips. The sound that emerged was absolutely awful. A loud, squeaky, painfully wrong note echoed through the room. Even Ethan winced. Oh wow. He stared at the instrument. That was a crime against music. Outside the observation room, several nurses laughed. Ethan tried again. The second attempt sounded even worse. One staff member nearly choked trying not to laugh. Ethan sighed dramatically. My father is probably disappointed in me from the afterlife. And then, it happened. A tiny sound escaped Lyra's throat. So soft that nobody was sure they had heard it. A short breath. Almost like a laugh. Everyone froze. Ethan froze. The nurses froze. Director Salen froze. For a moment nobody moved. The entire room became silent. Then Ethan slowly turned toward her. Lyra's eyes widened. She hadn't meant to make a sound. Not after all these years. Not after everything. Fear immediately appeared on her face. The familiar fear that always followed emotion. The fear that made her retreat back into silence. But Ethan did something unexpected. He pretended not to notice. He simply nodded toward the harmonica. Yeah, I know. He sighed. It's terrible. Relief appeared in Lyra's eyes. No pressure. No excitement. No celebration. Just normal. For the first time in years, making a sound hadn't turned her into a patient. It had simply made her a child. That evening, Director Salen called an emergency meeting. The staff gathered around a large conference table. Everyone looked excited. Everyone except Ethan. We're making progress, one therapist announced. Amazing progress. Another nodded. Perhaps we should begin structured communication therapy. No. The room fell silent. All eyes turned toward Ethan. The human folded his arms. Absolutely not. The therapists looked shocked. Why? Because she's finally starting to trust people. He looked around the room. The second she feels like she's becoming a project again, she'll disappear back behind that wall. Nobody answered. Deep down, they knew he was right. After a long moment, Director Salen nodded. We continue exactly as we are. The next week brought more changes. Small ones, but important. Lyra began sitting closer when Ethan visited. Sometimes she watched him repair equipment. Sometimes she followed him through the facility's garden. Still silent, but no longer distant. Then one rainy afternoon, Ethan found her standing alone beneath the shelter dome. The artificial sky projected storm clouds overhead. Rainwater streamed across the transparent ceiling. Lyra stood completely still, watching, listening, remembering. Ethan approached quietly. Neither spoke. Minutes passed. Then Ethan looked upward. My wife loved storms. Lyra glanced at him. He smiled sadly. She said storms proved that even the sky wasn't afraid to cry. The little alien girl's eyes widened, because she understood exactly what he meant. For years she had been afraid of her own grief, afraid of her memories, afraid of the pain. But Ethan wasn't hiding from his. He carried it openly. And somehow, he was still standing, still smiling, still living. For the first time, Lyra wondered if maybe she could too. Then Ethan heard it. A tiny whisper. So faint he almost believed he imagined it. A single word. One word after 6 years of silence. Why? Ethan's heart stopped. The rain continued falling above them. Neither moved. Neither breathed. Slowly, carefully, Ethan looked at her. Tears filled Lyra's eyes. Her voice trembled from disuse. Why do you still smile? The question shattered 6 years of silence. And at that exact moment, every camera, every microphone, and every observer in Horizon Refuge Center captured the impossible. The silent child had spoken. The moment Lyra spoke, the galaxy changed. Not because of what she said, but because after 6 years of silence, the forgotten child of Varel had finally asked a question. And now, everyone wanted to hear the answer. The artificial rain continued falling above the shelter dome. Neither Ethan nor Lyra moved. Her small voice still echoed in the air. Why do you still smile? The question carried far more weight than its simple words. She wasn't asking about happiness. She wasn't asking about optimism. She was asking how someone could survive unbearable loss and still continue living. Ethan understood immediately, because he had asked himself the same question countless times. He stared upward at the rain for a long moment. Then finally answered, I don't smile because I'm not hurting. Lyra listened carefully. Ethan's voice remained calm. I smile because she would hate seeing me give up. He looked down at the old photograph he always carried. The picture of his wife. The woman he had loved more than anything. The war took her from me. His eyes glistened. Some days I still wake up expecting her to be there. Lyra lowered her gaze. She understood that feeling. The feeling of reaching for someone who no longer existed. The feeling of forgetting for a moment that they were gone. Ethan continued. After she died, I was angry. His voice became quieter. At everyone. The enemy. The government. The universe. Myself. The words felt painfully honest. Eventually I realized something. Lyra looked up again. Ethan smiled sadly. If I let grief destroy me, then the war wins twice. The child stared at him. If I stop living. His voice trembled. If I stop caring about people. If I stop helping others. Then everything she loved disappears with her. Tears formed in Lyra's eyes. Because for the first time, someone had put her feelings into words. For years she had believed her silence honored the people she lost. But what if it didn't? What if it only gave the war another victory? Unknown to both of them, the conversation had been recorded. Not intentionally. The shelter's security systems automatically archived all public area footage. A technician later reviewed the recording. Then shared it with another employee. That employee shared it with a friend. Within days, the video spread beyond Horizon Refuge Center. Then beyond the planet. Then beyond the sector. Suddenly millions were watching. Millions witnessed the moment the silent child asked her question. Millions listened to Ethan's answer. Veterans watched. War refugees watched. Parents who had lost children watched. Children who had lost parents watched. Across the galaxy, people cried. Because Ethan wasn't speaking only to Lyra. He was speaking to everyone carrying invisible scars. A week later, Horizon Refuge Center received thousands of messages. Some came from soldiers. Some came from ordinary civilians. Many contained the same words. Thank you. One letter especially caught Director Salen's attention. It came from an elderly Varelian woman living 3 systems away. The message was simple. For years, she had blamed herself for surviving the destruction of her homeworld while her family died. After hearing Ethan's words, she finally visited her grandchildren. The first family gathering in nearly a decade. When Salen read the letter, tears filled his eyes. One conversation, one answer, and already lives were changing. Meanwhile, Lyra continued speaking. Not much, only a few words each day. But every word felt like a miracle. One afternoon she surprised Ethan. They sat together watching the sunset projection inside the shelter garden. Without warning, she asked, "Did it stop hurting?" Ethan immediately knew what she meant. Did losing his wife stop hurting? He smiled gently. No. Lyra looked disappointed. Ethan pointed toward the sky. But you learn how to carry it. The little girl frowned. Carry it. He nodded. Like a heavy backpack. At first it feels impossible. Then one day you realize you're stronger than before. Lyra thought about that for a long time. For the first time since arriving at the shelter, the future didn't seem quite as frightening. But neither of them knew that a storm was coming. Because somewhere beyond the Orion sector, someone had seen the recordings. Someone powerful. Someone connected to the war that destroyed Lyra's home. And they were now traveling toward Horizon Refuge Center. The shuttle arrived without warning. No public announcement. No official ceremony. Just a sleek black diplomatic vessel descending through the clouds toward Horizon Refuge Center. The moment Director Salen saw the identification code, his blood ran cold. Because he recognized the name immediately. And so would every survivor of the Varelian War. The visitor's name was Kael Voran, former supreme strategist of the Carthan Empire. One of the men responsible for planning the invasion that destroyed Lyra's homeworld. For years his name had been spoken with hatred across dozens of systems. Millions blamed him for the deaths of their families. Millions wanted him imprisoned. Some wanted him dead. When the security report reached Ethan, he stared at the screen in disbelief. He's here. Salen nodded grimly. He specifically requested to meet Lyra. Ethan's jaw tightened. No. The answer came instantly. No chance. But Salen looked troubled. He's no longer part of the Empire. What does that matter? Because after the war ended, he publicly condemned the invasion. Ethan folded his arms. That doesn't bring anyone back. No, Salen admitted. It doesn't. The room fell silent. Neither man knew what the right answer was. That afternoon, Kael Voran entered the shelter. The facility immediately became tense. Staff members stared. Refugees whispered. Several veterans walked away rather than look at him. The old Carthan seemed to age under every hostile gaze. His scales had faded with time. His posture was no longer proud. He looked tired, broken, even, as though the weight of countless ghosts followed him everywhere. Ethan disliked him immediately, not because of who he was, because of what he represented. Loss, pain, war, everything that had stolen happiness from people like Lyra. When Kael finally entered the garden where Lyra sat, the child froze. She recognized the uniform insignia. Even after all these years, fear immediately appeared in her eyes. Old memories surged back. Burning cities, falling ships, screams. Ethan moved beside her instinctively, protective, ready to remove her from the situation if necessary. But Kael stopped several meters away. He did not approach, did not demand attention, did not speak for nearly a minute. Then he slowly knelt. A former architect of war kneeling before a child. I owe you an apology. The words shocked everyone. Lyra stared silently. Kael lowered his head. I know it means nothing. His voice trembled. I know it changes nothing. The old alien swallowed hard. But I am sorry. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The garden felt frozen in time. Kael slowly removed a small object from his coat. A worn metal badge. The emblem of the Carthan High Command. The symbol he once carried proudly. Without hesitation, he placed it on the ground. Then stepped away from it. I spent my life believing victory justified everything. His eyes filled with regret. I was wrong. Ethan watched carefully, trying to determine whether this was genuine. Or merely another politician seeking forgiveness? Then Cale said something unexpected. I saw the recording. Lyra blinked. The one with the human. He looked toward Ethan. When she asked why you still smile. Ethan remained silent. Cale's voice grew softer. For 30 years I have not smiled. The confession stunned everyone. Every night I remember what we did. He looked at Lyra. Every face. Every world. Every child. The old strategist's shoulders shook. And I do not know how to live with it. For the first time, Lyra saw something she never expected to see. Not a monster. Not a conqueror. A man haunted by his own actions. Minutes passed. The garden remained silent. Then Cale asked a question. Not to Lyra. To Ethan. How do you carry it? The same question. The same pain. The same burden. Just from a different side of the war. Ethan looked at him for a long moment. Then finally answered. You don't carry it alone. Cale's eyes widened slightly. Ethan pointed toward Lyra. That's what I've been trying to teach her. The old alien looked down, as if hearing those words for the first time. And then something happened that nobody expected. Lyra slowly stood. The garden became completely silent. The child who had spent years hiding from the world took one careful step forward. Then another. Until she stood directly in front of the man who helped destroy her world. Everyone held their breath. No one knew what she would do. Not even Lyra herself. The entire garden stood frozen. Staff members. Refugees. Security officers. Director Salen. Even Ethan. Everyone watched as Lyra stood face to face with the man who had helped destroy her world. No one knew what would happen next. Some expected anger. Others expected fear. A few believed she would simply walk away. But nobody expected what she actually did. Cale Voran remained kneeling. His head lowered. His old command badge lying abandoned in the grass beside him. For perhaps the first time in his life, he looked completely powerless. Not because anyone had defeated him. Because he had finally seen the damage he helped create. And standing before him was one small survivor carrying that damage. Lyra stared at him silently. Her heart pounded. Memories flashed through her mind. Her mother's laughter. Her father's voice. The beautiful singing gardens of Varel. The fire. The explosions. The darkness. For years she had imagined the people responsible. She had imagined monsters. Creatures without feelings. Without regret. Without humanity. But the alien kneeling before her wasn't a monster. He was crying. And somehow that confused her more than anything. Cale finally spoke. His voice barely audible. You don't owe me forgiveness. The garden remained silent. You don't owe me kindness. A tear rolled down his face. You don't owe me anything. His shoulders trembled. I came because I needed you to know that I was wrong. The old strategist looked at the ground. And because I wanted to say your family mattered. The words struck Lyra like a physical blow. Because for years she had secretly feared something. That the galaxy had forgotten. That her parents had become statistics. Numbers in a history book. Casualties. Nothing more. Yet here was one of the people responsible admitting they mattered. That their lives had value. That their deaths mattered. For some reason, that realization hurt and healed at the same time. The crowd watched nervously. Ethan stayed close but didn't interfere. This was Lyra's moment. Her choice. No one else's. The little girl slowly looked down at the abandoned badge in the grass. The symbol of the empire that destroyed her world. The symbol of everything she hated. Slowly, she bent down and picked it up. Gasps echoed throughout the garden. Cale looked shocked. Everyone expected her to throw it away. To crush it. To reject it. Instead, Lyra held it carefully in her hands. Studying it. Thinking. Then she spoke. Her voice was still weak from years of silence. But every word was clear. My mother. The entire garden froze. Lyra rarely spoke more than a sentence. Now everyone listened. My mother said. Her eyes filled with tears. That broken things can become something new. Kale stared at her, unable to speak. Lyra looked down at the badge, then slowly placed it back into his hands. Not as a symbol of war, as a responsibility, a reminder, a promise. Then make it new. The words shattered Kale completely. The old strategist broke down. Decades of guilt, decades of shame, decades of self-hatred, all released at once. He covered his face and cried openly. Not as a military leader, not as a politician, simply as an old man who wished he could undo the past. Around the garden, many people began crying too. Even some who had sworn they would never forgive the Carthans. Because they were witnessing something rare. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Something harder. The decision to stop letting hate control the future. Later that evening, recordings of the encounter spread across the galaxy. The reaction was immediate. Millions watched Lyra return the badge. Millions listened to her words. Then make it new. The phrase appeared everywhere. On news networks. On refugee memorials. On schools. On government buildings. For survivors, it became a symbol of hope. For former enemies, it became a challenge. If a child who lost everything could choose healing over hatred, what excuse did anyone else have? That night, Ethan and Lyra sat together beneath the shelter dome, watching the stars. Neither spoke for a while. Then Lyra quietly asked, "Do you think my parents would be proud of me?" Ethan looked at her. The question carried every fear she had hidden for years. Every doubt. Every wound. Every lonely night. Ethan smiled softly. "Lyra." He pointed toward the stars above. "I think they're already bragging about you." For the first time in 6 years, the little alien girl laughed. A real laugh. Bright. Warm. Alive. And somewhere among the stars, it felt as though the universe laughed with her. But neither Ethan nor Lyra knew that an even bigger challenge was approaching. One that would test everything they had learned. Because a message had just arrived from the Galactic Council. And they wanted Lyra to speak before the entire galaxy. The invitation terrified Lyra. Not because it came from the Galactic Council. Not because billions of people would be watching. But because it required something she had spent 6 years avoiding. Speaking. The message arrived 3 days after the encounter with Kale Voran. The council wanted Lyra to appear during the annual Day of Remembrance. A ceremony broadcast across thousands of worlds. Every year, survivors of war shared their stories. This year, they wanted the child who had broken 6 years of silence. When Director Salen delivered the news, Lyra immediately shook her head. No. The answer came so fast that even Ethan was surprised. "I can't." "You can," Ethan said gently. She looked away. "No." For a moment, she sounded like the frightened child he had first met by the window. The child hiding behind walls. The child afraid to be seen. Afraid to be heard. Afraid to remember. That evening they sat beneath the shelter dome, watching the stars. The same place where Lyra had laughed for the first time. For a long time neither spoke. Finally Lyra whispered, "What if I forget my words?" Ethan smiled. "Then forget them." She frowned. "What if everyone stares at me?" "Then let them." "What if I cry?" "Then cry." Lyra looked confused. "That's terrible advice." Ethan laughed. "Probably." The sound made her smile. Then his expression softened. "Lyra." She looked up. "You think people need a perfect speech?" He shook his head. "They don't." "What do they need?" Ethan stared toward the stars. "The truth." The Day of Remembrance arrived. Across the galaxy, billions tuned in. Council chambers overflowed with diplomats, veterans, refugees, journalists, families. Even Kale Voran sat among the audience, watching quietly, waiting. The giant hall contained representatives from hundreds of species. Yet when Lyra stepped onto the stage, complete silence filled the chamber. Everyone knew her face. Everyone knew her story. The silent child. The survivor. The girl who had become a symbol of healing. But now she had to stand alone beneath the lights. And speak. Her legs trembled. Her hands shook. For a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm her. The crowd seemed endless. Thousands inside the chamber. Billions beyond it. Then she spotted Ethan standing near the side of the stage. He wasn't speaking. Wasn't signaling. Wasn't helping. He simply smiled. The same calm smile he always wore. The smile she had asked about months ago. And suddenly she remembered his answer. If I let grief destroy me, then the war wins twice. Lyra took a deep breath. Then stepped toward the microphone. My name is Lyra. The words echoed throughout the chamber. Across countless worlds. Every screen. Every home. Every refugee center. Every hospital. Every memorial. People leaned forward. Listening. I stopped talking because I was afraid. Her voice trembled. But not afraid of people. Tears appeared in her eyes. I was afraid that if I spoke, the pain would come back. The chamber remained silent. No one moved. No one looked away. Lyra swallowed hard. But the pain never left. A tear rolled down her cheek. I carried it every day. More tears followed. And I thought that meant I was broken. Across the galaxy, millions felt their hearts ache. Because they understood exactly what she meant. Then Lyra smiled. A small smile. A brave smile. The human who sat beside me taught me something. She looked toward Ethan. He taught me that carrying pain doesn't make you weak. Her voice grew stronger. It means you survived. The audience sat completely still. Many were already crying. Then came the words nobody would ever forget. My parents are gone. The chamber fell silent. I miss them every day. Her voice cracked. But loving them means living. She took another breath. Not hiding. Not hating. Living. The hall remained frozen. Even the translators seemed emotional. Then Lyra looked directly into the cameras. Into the eyes of billions. And spoke the words that would later be carved into monuments across the galaxy. The people we lose become part of us. So if we choose kindness, they continue shining through us. For several seconds after she finished, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The entire galaxy seemed frozen. Then one person stood. Then another. Then another. Within moments, the entire chamber rose to its feet. A standing ovation unlike anything in Galactic Council history. People cried openly. Veterans embraced former enemies. Refugees held their families close. Even Kale Voran wiped tears from his eyes. And Ethan? He simply smiled. Because the little girl who had once feared her own voice had just changed the galaxy. But one final chapter remained. Because later that night, Lyra would make a decision that surprised everyone. A decision that would define the rest of her life. And reveal the true legacy of the human who simply sat beside her. Years passed. The galaxy changed. Wars ended. Borders shifted. New leaders rose and fell. But one story refused to fade. The story of a little alien girl who had not spoken in years. And the human who simply sat beside her. 10 years after her famous speech, Lyra stood on a stage once again. But this time she wasn't a frightened child. She was a young woman. Confident. Strong. Respected across the galaxy. The former silent child had become one of the most influential voices for peace and recovery among the stars. Thousands had gathered before her. Millions watched the broadcast. Behind her stood the newly completed Horizon Center network. A system of shelters, schools, counseling centers, and recovery programs built across hundreds of worlds. Places designed to help survivors rebuild their lives. Places where nobody would have to suffer alone. The project carried a simple motto. Sit beside them. Reporters often asked Lyra where the idea came from. Every time, she gave the same answer. Because healing begins when someone stays. Not when they fix you. Not when they lecture you. Not when they force you to move on. When they stay. The philosophy spread throughout the galaxy. Doctors adopted it. Teachers adopted it. Parents adopted it. Governments adopted it. And countless lives changed because of it. Yet despite everything she achieved, one place remained special. The old shelter. Room 47. The window. The chair. The place where it all began. Every year Lyra returned there. Alone. Just to remember. One rainy afternoon she entered the room once more. The chair was still there. The same chair Ethan had pulled beside her window all those years ago. She smiled softly. Then sat down. Rain tapped against the glass exactly as it had on the first day they met. For a moment it felt as though time had stopped. As though she were that frightened little girl again. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. The door opened. Director Salen entered. Much older now. His hair nearly white. His movements slower. But his smile remained familiar. He handed her a small package. It arrived this morning. Lyra frowned. For me. Salen nodded. It was left in Ethan's belongings. Her heart skipped. Ethan. The man who changed her life. The man who never wanted recognition. The man who always insisted he wasn't special. 3 years earlier, Ethan had passed away peacefully in his sleep. The news had shaken the entire galaxy. Millions mourned. But to Lyra, the loss felt personal. Like losing family. With trembling hands she opened the package. Inside was a simple handwritten letter. The paper looked old. Worn. As though Ethan had written it long ago. Tears immediately filled her eyes. She recognized his handwriting. Slowly she began reading. Dear Lyra. If you're reading this, then I'm probably gone. Don't be sad for too long. You already know I'd complain about that. A small laugh escaped her. Exactly something Ethan would say. More tears followed. There is something I never told you. The day I entered room 47, I wasn't trying to save you. I wasn't trying to heal anyone. The truth is, I was lonely. Lyra stopped breathing. After losing my wife, I spent years pretending I was okay. Then I saw a little girl sitting alone by a window. And I realized she looked exactly how I felt. Tears streamed down Lyra's face. People say I helped you find your voice. Maybe. But you helped me find mine too. By now Lyra could barely read through her tears. The final lines waited at the bottom of the page. The galaxy thinks this story is about a human saving an alien child. They are wrong. It's about two broken people reminding each other how to live. Thank you for sitting beside me too. Ethan. The room became silent. Only the rain remained. Lyra carefully pressed the letter against her chest. And cried. Not from sadness. Not entirely. But from gratitude. Because some people leave footprints so deep that they continue guiding others long after they are gone. Later that evening, a massive ceremony was held beneath the stars. Representatives from hundreds of worlds attended. At the center stood a new monument. Not of a warrior. Not of a king. Not of a politician. But of an ordinary human sitting beside an alien child. No weapons. No glory. No victory. Just kindness. The crowd fell silent as Lyra stepped forward. She looked up at the statue. Then spoke one final time. The strongest thing a human ever did for me wasn't fighting a war. It wasn't winning a battle. It wasn't saving the galaxy. Her voice grew softer. It was pulling up a chair. Many in the crowd wiped away tears. Lyra smiled toward the stars. And somewhere beyond them, she imagined Ethan smiling back. The rain began to fall. Soft, gentle, beautiful. And for the first time in a very long time, it sounded like home. If this story touched your heart, like, subscribe, and join the journey for more emotional HFY stories where humanity's greatest strength isn't power, it's compassion. Sit beside them. The legacy that changed the galaxy.